When I first started playing Final Fantasy XIV, there was only one thing that was crystal clear.
The warrior of light.
Shadowbringers. Play Shadowbringers. Skip to Shadowbringers. Shadowbringers makes everything worth it. Shadowbringers is better than other Final Fantasy games. Shadowbringers is the best expansion. Shadowbringers is the best experience the game has delivered so far. And if I'm being completely honest with you, it was what made me want to put the game down. I couldn't stand the idea that the only version of the game worth playing was the third expansion. Well, fourth technically, since Shadowbringers is 5.0, but that's besides the point. I felt kind of insulted on behalf of the game for being told that what equates to 60 hours of content isn't ultimately worth it, and only the later 20 hours is. Oh boy, that's comforting. And go ahead, tell me all about how the beginning of the game is just awful, the second part is the hook, tell me nothing about the third act, and then get on your knees and suck Shadowbringers off until it makes a mess of things and you're just begging for more. I totally enjoy that, internet. You're extremely convincing. Like, is A Realm Reborn really that bad? I swear to God, if I hear another person try to invalidate my experience by saying, oh, it used to be so much worse, I'm going to fly off a goddamn cliff. Consider that the huge boom in your player base and success as an MMORPG comes from people picking up the free trial that included a quote-unquote fixed A Realm Reborn, and that maybe you shouldn't espouse how good the new people have it because that makes you sound like an asshole. If I have to hear another person tell me that I just don't fundamentally understand what's so good about Heavensward because it's not 2015 anymore and I just wasn't there to experience the mechanical changes, I implore you to go outside and reevaluate how you want people to enjoy your eyeball-melting anime game. You're the exact people that kept me from enjoying this game. Which I do, by the way. I enjoy it a lot. The fact that I have to dig deep for anything about Stormblood that isn't sucking Xenos' dick or praising the fact that we now have a definitive place where Au Ra are from says a lot about how people didn't pay attention to what was going on. It wounds me to know that people didn't see the overwhelming problems with the story we faced and were just happy that we had a Japanese embassy to live in now. You fucking weebs. This is all to say that, yes, I did enjoy Shadowbringers. I enjoyed it quite a lot. But I hate everyone who is now feeling smugly satisfied that their recommendations were correct, and now it's my job to tell you how I interpreted the best expansion the game had to offer so far up until Endwalker dropped. Because guess what? I used the wrong formula and got the right answer. My name is Sonata and welcome to the Space Show. Here's what you missed from Shadowbringers. Part 1. Pacing. So to illustrate what works really well in a general sense about Shadowbringers, it would actually be easier to explain part of what didn't work about Stormblood. This is something I don't see a lot of people bring up because this sort of thing is also part of why A Realm Reborn and Heavensward work, which I'm surprised nobody's realized this or at the very least even talked about it. A lot of the progression of A Realm Reborn is collecting the 6 crystallized essences of primals and using them to empower your connection to Hydaelyn and gain her blessing, ascending from just a humble adventurer to the Warrior of Light, ultimately stopping the one thing that could destroy most of the continental Eorzea. In the patches of A Realm Reborn, your connection to Hydaelyn is severed by Midgardstormer, and then Heavensward proper starts up and you have to rekindle your connection to the light by powering the crystals again, ultimately slaying someone who became the very thing you are destined to defeat. In Stormblood, you don't do that. You go to Girabanya, you go to Othard, go back to Girabanya, slay a human-turned-primal. I feel like we missed half of the steps. Now, in Shadowbringers, it's totally different. See, you get summoned to another world, not totally unlike your own, and you have to slay massive creatures called Light Wardens to collect their essence and bring back the night. And now you see the pattern. What Stormblood misses is this critical path of collection, and you wouldn't easily see the problem unless you had played all of the expansions, which I'm assuming you have, by the way. This collection aspect is utterly important to how well the story flows from plot point to plot point. You weren't meant to play this game and solely grind MSQ for hours to complete the story within a day. That's extremely unhealthy, and you generally miss all the great things about the expansion if you do that. But also consider, all of the good expansions give you plenty of time to rest and figure out what you want to do next. Whether that be introspection, actual resting, light characterization, and world building, what have you. There's always points where you're encouraged to put the story down, and this is only enhanced by this collection gimmick. After you get any sort of thing in A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, or Shadowbringers, you're encouraged, or at the very least, implied to have gone and taken a minute to rest up and stop worrying for 5 minutes. Even heroes need breaks. It's why, as annoying as I find it to be, coming home and relaxing in your inn room, or at the Waking Sands, or at House Fortom, it's important to how the story is paced and how well it flows from one minute to the next. And that's part of why the pacing in Shadowbringers worked as well as it did. Not because it did much to deviate from the formula, but because it embraced something that was already there and just made it more fun to engage with. That, and if you ask me, I think it was a giant strength to start with recollecting the two characters who arguably mean the most to most players, and more than likely, the Warrior of Light. So after your character is summoned to the new world, you're tasked with seeking out your friends and forming a party to help figure out how to properly save your world and this one, because they're both in danger. The first two characters you go after are Alphino and Alize, the two people who I guarantee you care the most about at this point in time. Re-establishing connections with them also serves the purpose of introducing us, the players, to certain facets of the world you live in. While the adults of your party, Y'shtola, Urianger, and Thancred, are meant to build on the societies and offer deeper character moments, the twins build on the struggles of the general populace as they've grown closer to them and understand them just that little bit more. As they are more empathetic beings, as they are still growing into whole people that you've seen develop as the story goes on, it's that much more crucial that you're still learning things as they are. You know, because it's critical to Shadowbringers being as good as it is, I'm gonna talk about the characters, because I feel that's what's missing in a lot of people's recommendations of the expansion. I mean, sure, they don't want to spoil anything, but they don't even mention how well every character is built up to this point in the story, and why it matters that they're put into this sort of situation in the first place, building on their knowledge from their original world and putting themselves to the test in multiple situations and coming out of the other end better for it. No, you guys just coast on talking about the tragedy of Yulmore and treating it like it's everyone. I fucking hate y'all. None of you even mentioned that this story is a niece. Part 2, The Twins. That's right, I'm not done talking about Alphino and Alize because I need to explain why exactly they're instrumental to making Shadowbringers shoot you right into the action up until you beat Holminster's Switch and the floodgates rip wide open. So I personally did Alphino first because my Warrior of Light knows that Alize could hold her own for a couple more days and he just really wanted to get to see Alphino again. Boy can barely take care of himself. He can't even swim. See, anytime someone tries to talk about Shadowbringers, they bring up Yulmore, and while a large part of the story is placed in this country, I think it's glossed over how much Alphino shines here as a character because he sees a lot of his former self in this city of paradise. How possibly it can sustain itself is an abject mystery up until near end of the main storyline when we learn something really horrific. Alphino, upon meeting you again, he isn't overwhelmed with joy to see you. He knows you were coming back eventually. But it's this little moment where he goes, "Hey friend, ready for another adventure?" And that's it! That's the perfect hook to send you into the next stage of your Warrior of Light. You're in a new land, you've just got done watching your friends leave you one by one, and now you're about to embark on what certainly is going to be something world-shatteringly dangerous and completely new to everyone involved. It's that warm attitude that really made me start to enjoy Shadowbringers from the very start instead of the good parts coming later. I can't say that kind of thing about any other expansion so far, where I had to really sit down and think about what I enjoyed, when I enjoyed it, and why. Character-wise, that was the start of my enjoyment because it felt much like an old friend was welcoming me back into the game, which I felt like I desperately needed because I just finished the Stormblood patches the day before Endwalker early access released, and then I had to, you know, go through the login queue, and I got to 2,000, which isn't that bad, but then I hit 1, and then I got ejected. That, and I think from an overall story standpoint, I feel like Alphino's route leads easier into Alize's because most of the horrific undertones of Yulmore's standing in society are kept as undertones, little hints of things to come. And I like that more than starting out with balls to the wall action. Alize's route has you traveling to the deserts of Amarang and meeting up with the girl, who is no doubt overwhelmed with joy to see you again despite not vocalizing it. Something that's not so lightly hidden throughout the parts of the game where Alize isn't a non-character is that she has a crush on the Warrior of Light, and it's extremely adorable how unsubtle it is. Regardless, it's here that you're brought up to speed on the Sin Eaters, the main threat of the new world you live in. As soon as you learn how to defeat them and how they reproduce, which is through zombie rules, you're then witness to someone on the team playing a bit too much Bayonetta and going ham on designs, followed by body horror. I fucking love this game so much. And this isn't to downplay the importance of Alize's story by making it lesser in length, I just think that it's more straightforward than Alphinaud's. Especially considering that there isn't that slight amount of outward physical development in terms of outfits, I feel like the outfit changing from expansion to expansion not only lets the designers flex how much they like to draw clothes, but also signifies development of the characters. Alize has already gotten accustomed to Norvrant's eccentricities, and therefore has already been given her own change of clothes. Alphinaud is in this adorable poncho thing, which I wish he kept in all honesty, but is given his blues after entering Yulemoor, which is also why I think Alize works better as a follow-up, because when you get to her, there's nothing but news to see. The part of the Sin Eater reveal that works better for Alize on top of that is how much more of a fighter she is than her brother, so it makes sense that the combat-oriented person follows what was basically a calm startup. In essence, all leading up to Holdminster Switch, we have a mini 3-act structure within our already clearly lined 3-act structure of Shadowbringers. Holdminster Switch is the level 71 dungeon that introduces the trust system to the player, in which you're capable of running through main story quest dungeons using parties filled with nothing but NPCs, who are way smarter than you because they understand dungeon and boss mechanics. Holdminster Switch is the culmination of Alphinaud getting accustomed to his new surroundings properly, Alize's heartbreak after watching her friend become a Sin Eater, and the Crystal Exarch entrusting the fate of Norvrant into the hands of the Warrior of Light, who will now be known as the Warrior of Darkness. Your path is clear. The only thing left for you to do is walk it. Part 3, the rest of the crew. As much as I'd love to go in depth about every single character and why they're great at this point in time, I don't have a year to dedicate to one video and I'm not an Endwalker yet, so unfortunately it's going to have to wait. The fun part is, who do you choose to see first? Spoilers, it's Thancred. Thancred has been in this place the longest out of all the others, and therefore has the most experience. Along the way, he actually has had a companion of his own, Minfilia. Now, for those of you that don't play Final Fantasy, that name isn't going to have much meaning, but it's important, because Minfilia, for all intents and purposes, is dead. So this girl's name is just Minfilia. And she comes from a long line of young women with blonde hair and blue eyes given the name and the title of the Oracle of Light. Minfilia, the original character, was the original leader of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, which is a group of neutral-partied adventurers keeping the threat of resummoned false gods in check back in the world that you came from, Eorzea. But the problem is, right at the end of the Irama-born patches, Minfilia rejoins with the spirit of Hydaelyn, our god, and essentially leaves the story. Minfilia should not be an entity, and yet here she is in the young girl that Thancred is traveling with. The reason? Well, she was captured by Vothri, the leader of Yulemoor, and Thancred heard the name and said that he wasn't standing for any of that shit. This is shown in the Shadowbringers trailer when we see the new job that Thancred has, which is my job. I'll get to that later. Anyways, we meet Thancred and Minfilia and get caught up to speed on everything that I just told you, but more immersive because Thancred is hot again. Listen, I wasn't a fan of his look in the Heavensward patches and Stormblood. Just no. Dirty, stinky, homeless man. Shadowbringers Thancred took a shower. I appreciate that Shadowbringers Thancred took a shower. Thancred is really interesting to me because throughout the series, he's already portrayed as having his shit together, but in reality, he's only got a few screws keeping him together. Honestly, with all the Scion's power combined, you only have one functioning adult. Most of that function comes from Y'shtola. With the Shadowbringers incarnation of the man, it's actually shown off how much he's been broken by circumstance. Whether that be through a point in the story where we play as him, his explanation of why he chose to pick up the Gunblade in the first place, or his interactions with Minfilia. The picture painted is one of a man trying to be better for himself and for others, and I appreciate the attempt. It's not as if he's an unforgiven soul looking for redemption, but I appreciate how much it seems like he's doing things mostly for his own reasons, rather than outward ones. Urianger is the next character that we meet in Shadowbringers, and it's here that we see the most outwardly drastic change in appearance. While we're not strangers to what Urianger is supposed to look like, especially after his seeming betrayal during the Dragonsong War, it's different enough to see him willingly exposed like this, and staying that way. As there is no need for Etherovision goggles anymore, Urianger is free to look at the world with his own eyes, and this he has done, along with taking up a new profession. Actually, everyone except for Alphino and Alize have taken up new job professions, one of them being Thancred, who has the best job, but I digress. Urianger has taken up Astrologian, and Y'shtola has more acclimated herself to being a black mage rather than the conjurer she was before this. There's not much to bring up when it comes to Urianger because his major developments don't actually come to light until the end of Shadowbringers and in Endwalker. There's not much I can say other than the fact that Cursive Man is once again one of our most ardent allies and genuinely one of the better characters during the story. He's not developed super hard, and that's completely okay. Now, as much as I'd love to go on and on about Y'shtola, and rest assured, I can and probably will, I don't have all year. Since nobody watched it, I guess I get to repeat myself when I say that one of the reasons why Y'shtola is my favorite character in this game is the idea of a finished character. One who isn't meant to grow and develop as much as others throughout the story because they already have everything put together and therefore can hold off a minute on being struck with trauma because they are an inspiration to the other members of the cast. This is the part that Y'shtola plays in spades, portrayed no better as she takes up the name of Master Matoya while she integrated herself in one of the Forest Societies, the Knights Blessed. Now, as she basically became their leader in a matter of a year due to her being the most beautiful thing on the continent, due to her being the smartest gal around and easily capable of committing domicile takeover and making herself a low-key matriarch, the only thing she's lacking is children, but the fact that she kind of starts momming you, and then you can proceed to call her mom, and she goes along with it? Guys, I think Y'shtola has a thing for being a mom. Not even in the kinky way either.
I want mommy, I want milk, I want to be held, I want to be comforted. And if you do not do all these things immediately, I will ruin your life.
Characters who have no development over the story aren't necessarily a bad thing. Characters are allowed to be mentors, inspirations, teachers, things like that. It's why they work, and changing that would be fundamentally bad for story pacing as a whole. The entirety of Shadowbringers is more about Small Minfilia and the Warrior of Light over any other principal character. Y'shtola most of all, as she is the only person in the entire group that could reasonably be considered a medical doctor. Urianger and Alphino are healers on paper, but Alphino switched to laser guns and Urianger doesn't keep a grimoire on his person for nothing. It's this acting as a light of inspiration for the others that I find Y'shtola more interesting than if were she just portrayed as the hot one, which is kind of hard to label her as when her, Urianger, and Thancred all got me feeling a certain kind of way. This isn't to say that I don't want or would turn away development for her, it's just that as of now, since she's a whole-ass person who has everything screwed together properly, she doesn't need it. That's one of my favorite things in characters across the board. Now, she used to just be a kind of smug, kind of smart Catwoman, but they replaced it with an energy that I can't put into proper words. The absolute chemistry she has on screen with the Thancred and the Urianger, the way she talks to others about how to proceed. I love smart women, by the way, if you couldn't tell. And if there's any moment that ripped me several new ones, it's when you first meet her again in Norvrant. Because at this point you have suffused the light of 2 Light Wardens, your ether isn't anything like she's used to. The way she looks at you upon realizing what you must have done, and how everything clicks together when she more than likely realizes what's going on, it's like a mix of surprise, relief, joy, and everything coming together. The party is whole again. So when I was getting into this game and editing a video for someone else, I get this feeling that nobody wanted to mention the fact that Shadowbringers is just the writers saying that they wanted to hop on that Isekai anime bandwagon, and then they ran with it after they got the writer for the Dark Knight questline involved. It was then that I was informed that apparently people talked about how this wasn't Isekai all the time when it first came out, but I'm going to ignore that because my experiences are my experiences, and these are usually videos about my feelings. So I don't fucking know. Grab a beer. It's on me. I think what's been forgotten, or at least become irrelevant, or maybe not even brought up, is how deep into isekai plotlines this story actually is. The protagonist is summoned to another world by a wiser, older being who then tasks them with recruiting a party of like-minded individuals, stop a great tragedy from befalling this world by collecting something that will eventually help you in the long run, and then get you to go home after a heartfelt goodbye. Throw in some hot women with animal ears and tails and bada bing bada boom, you've got a story. Now you have a few hundred chapters of manga filled with laughs and action and boobs sometimes, throw in all the fan content derived from hooks by non-characters because fanfiction writers don't know what flavoring is or how flanderization happens, and I think you've got a half-decent thing going on around here. I feel like I've just described the familiar Zero in some roundabout way, and I didn't even mean to. Yes, I realize that's reductive, but I feel like it illustrates my next point. That being, I feel like people blow things way out of proportion when they say that Shadowbringers as a standalone expansion is better than some Final Fantasy games. Which, you know, I have to ask, do you mean Final Fantasy 2 and 13? Because those aren't even high bars to clear. And you can just say 2, because 13 is fine. It's just fine. Like, this is part of my gripes with people trying to get others into the game, because they hype up Shadowbringers without truly understanding that the other parts of the game are very necessary to enjoying the plot of Shadowbringers and tie the whole thing together as a package because that's how it was written. Now, I'm not here to tell you how you're supposed to enjoy the game. I don't pay your sub. If you're willing to scrub out what, at the time, was 25 to 75% of the experience, I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice. I've said this before. Everything coils around in your brain many times without you even knowing. So I feel like a lot of your enjoyment comes from you having experienced the really good moments of expansions past. Like, sure, personal bias here, but I wouldn't have been half as heartbroken about watching Y'shtola drop out of nowhere when she gets summoned if I didn't just get done watching her get slashed across the chest and go out of commission for 20 hours during Stormblood. I wouldn't feel happy seeing Alisaie break fully out of her shell during her time in Amareng if I didn't get to experience her brand of humor and fighting during Stormblood. Do I even need to bring up Alphino bringing up his past hubris during the patches of A Realm Reborn, and how he worked through his shit in Heavensward, and is now applying the lessons learned from his mistakes in Shadowbringers. I wouldn't be happy seeing Thancred and Urianger take a goddamn shower, drink some water, and end up better people on the other side of the portal. None of that would be good to see if you hadn't had the context of the other 3 expansions. Now, I'm sure some of you, in your heads, are going, oh, but if you separate the expansion from the rest of the games, the story still works. And no. No, it doesn't. I've already demonstrated this. Hell, the giant reference of the Crystal Tower doesn't even work because that's a Final Fantasy III reference, and only holds meaning to people who have played A Realm Reborn's Alliance raids, or people who have played Final Fantasy III. Now, because of patch 5.1 and my masochism, I actually have done both, but that doesn't mean you could have just handed me Shadowbringers without having me do some homework. Not even just the legacy homework, the other things in the story as well. They're all built on A Realm Reborn and Heavensward. Maybe not so much Stormblood. And another thing I'm sure that I'm going to be hearing is, oh, but if you treat it as its own thing, or oh, but if they did it as its own thing, you're kind of backing yourself into a corner. Why do I have to fundamentally change how I think about it, or think about how it could have been written differently, in order to enjoy it as its own thing? Shadowbringers, much like everything else in life, unfortunately, is not in a vacuum, and never can be in a vacuum. Shadowbringers is part 4 of an, at the time, 4-part series. One where you have to suck up and accept that the other 3 parts are very necessary. You wouldn't jump into Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire as your jumping off point for the Harry Potter series, would you? You wouldn't go read Twilight Breaking Dawn and act like that's the only one that's worth it, and then go on to say that the book on its own has no other ties to the rest of the series, as it's better than all the other teenage vampire fiction, right? Well, even then you would be wrong, because Vladimir Todd exists. What I'm really trying to get at is how much anger I had when people just kept telling me that Shadowbringers was so good, over and over again, because, like, mate, telling me that isn't going to be the thing that made me go, yeah, that was worth it. That's not hyping me up for something later to come. That's gatekeeping. I'm not at the quote-unquote good part yet. I don't understand what you went through back in 2015. I don't get it. Sonata, you're just wrong. And I hope you get to Shadowbringers, because then it'll all be worth it and you'll finally understand. I liked A Realm Reborn. I didn't think Heaven's Ward was that good. I don't like Xenos. I liked Shadowbringers for different reasons. One of those reasons being that it didn't treat me like an idiot for my opinions like the rest of the people who kept trying to hype me up about this game did. Holy fuck! Now, when I was playing Shadowbringers and editing the Stormblood video, I had been formulating how I was going to put the eventual Shadowbringers video together because, you know, I wanted it to be epic and all that. I wanted to start the video off with people saying good things about Shadowbringers while mentioning the name as much as humanly possible, even if it sounded wrong, because I eventually was going to have this bit where people shouted Shadowbringers at me while I slowly grew insane. And this is all formulating in my head up until about, like, level 77. Innocence is such a cool fight.
It really is.
Like, the name, the Crown of the Immaculate, that's raw as fuck, dude. Now, in order to gauge, like, my time, like, physical playtime with the game, I generally like to look at the quest list and formulate how long I'm going to be playing, shit like that, and boy howdy, I saw the Yulmore Aetheryte was way down on the list. Up to this point in the story, I thought I was being smug and shit because one of my main points was going to be something I iterated on in my Dragon Quest XI video, one that you guys should go and watch because that was months of my life playing and crying over a game. I said that stories don't necessarily have to be new in order to be interesting, and that they just needed to tell their stories well and immerse you into the world that the characters inhabit, in order to be memorable. Content warning, body horror and cannibalism. And up until this point, Shadowbringers was just doing the isekai runaround, and I was having a good old time with the characters I had been getting to know over the past 80 hours of playtime, and Reen for the past 10. Like, yeah, I will go absorb the light of the big bads called Light Wardens and bring back the night sky. Yeah, fuck, I will accept the title as the Warrior of Darkness, because it's a direct contrast to my Eorzean title. Yeah, that's tight. Yeah. Oh, I have to keep that shit hidden so as to not disrupt the views of the populace wherever I go? God damn, man, am I fucking Batman? This is the best isekai story I've ever seen with an overpowered main character. Overly cautious hero notwithstanding. It's then that we're told that a bread-like foodstuff given out by Yulmore's leader to its people and to drifters in the ghetto under Yulmore is actually made of sin eaters. Now, if your brain is mush, first off, I understand because I've been talking too long. Second, that means that this guy has been feeding people the suffused light beings of the primary enemy you've been fighting the entire game. Remember how you get turned into a sin eater if you're attacked by a sin eater?
These sin eaters, what if they are not simply rounded up? Do you remember what we were told when first we came to the city? Many enter, but none leave.
That's when I knew I had something special, because it's at this point, things go off the goddamn rails in terms of visuals and storytelling, up to slaying something that looks like it crawled out of biblical paintings. And even then, Shadowbringers isn't done hitting you with things, because even before this, it was recontextualizing the entirety of the world you live in and your gods from then and before, which is then followed up in Endwalker perfectly. Hydaelyn, the mother crystal that you are an emissary for, and the god being Zodiark that the Ascians worship and want to bring back to life, are primals. The very thing you have been destined to slay this entire time. And despite that being the part where I was hooked into this story more so than ever, the part about eating sin eaters was when it slapped me and told me to pay the fuck attention. Again, because now I'm slapping you, and you're gonna pay attention, because holy fuck, the gameplay that Shadowbringers brought to the table is unmatched. Up until this point, purely mechanically speaking, I will concede that I literally cannot and could not know how things were, because I started playing at the end of the life cycle for Shadowbringers. But that means for 60% of my game time, I was running on the engine that Shadowbringers uses, and holy fuck, I love everything about it. I don't know when this happened, but the removal of the off-tank stance and the homogenization of everything going right into this tank stance, which only affects enmity generation, is absolutely godlike. Oh, should I talk about the Dark Knight editions? Well, on top of getting the best mitigation skill in the game despite being a barrier break move, he also gets the rawest skill in the game in the form of Living Shadow, which the significance of one is one thing I would hesitate to spoil in this video because the Dark Knight questline is bloody amazing. I mentioned this before in this video, but the writer for the Dark Knight questline was a Shadowbringers writer, so Paladins finally got their gap closer. The White Mage Lilies became useful, Machinists got to make XJ9, and holy fuck do I get to finally talk about the 2 jobs they added during Shadowbringers. The first thing I did when I bought the game after hitting level 60 with Warrior. Holy fuck, do I love the absolute hell out of Gunbreaker. And no, it's not because I like Final Fantasy VIII, because I don't. But it's because I originally had this idea and fetishistic need to unlock every job that didn't start at level 1, because fuck playing a job at level 1. That's all for me specifically, unless it's Summoner. When I picked up Gunbreaker, I could not begin to describe to you the raw power emanating from my gunblade. It was such a damage upgrade from Warrior that the joke about it being 3 DPS in a blue trench coat finally made sense. Cartridge skills? Baller! And they explode. Capstone ability? Holy fuck, I get to go kaboom! Continuation is the first time I experienced a skill turning into another skill during part of its combo, all tied to one button, and then I was able to just go skip it button that up. Oh, it's so fucking cool! And I'm still not done, because holy fuck, the mitigations on this thing have never felt better to use, despite being much easier than normal. Not only does Gunbreaker get reliable healing over time with the Brutal Shell status, I get a dedicated regen button that I can shoot at other party members, or myself, a mitigation skill that benefits other party members if I'm already under Brutal Shell, and I get the coolest invuln button, Superbolide, which is named after a dying star! Holy fuck, I'm so cool! And then there's Dancer, which is straight up just my favorite ranged DPS because I get to look sexy and beat up people with chakrams as if I were roleplaying as a white-haired catboy Axel from Kingdom Hearts. This isn't even to mention the best thing that Shadowbringers did in its patches, which was expedite the process to play A Realm Reborn by removing a good few quests, that also making a few fights that were, assumedly optional, mandatory. This sounds like a bad thing, but it's literally nothing but a good thing. They first force you to redo the main 3 trials of Ifrit, Titan, and Garuda in their hard versions in order to facilitate that, yes, the trials you face are going to be hard now. That was a smart idea, despite us having to redo Titan again in Heaven's Award, so what the hell was the point? That and the best thing they could have done, which was make players understand the importance and functions of Alliance raids by introducing G'raha Tia, the wise old man you've been with the entire game. Now, originally that sort of reveal was meant to make the people who played the Crystal Tower series feel good about themselves, because the Crystal Tower itself is an integral part of the story of Shadowbringers. But by making everyone do the raids starting from A Realm Reborn, I feel like the effect is twofold. One being that it's the first time you're ever subjected to playing a 24-player experience, which is quite a lot, even if you're split into alliances and whatnot. Tank mains like me have to run with the responsibility of all 3 of us running tank stance because we all need to be able to pull aggro at a moment's notice. Healers are now more into the action because they have another DPS to worry about rather than 2 tanks. Healers, please remember to heal your DPS when necessary. DPS, keep doing your job, guys. I love you, but keep doing your goddamn jobs. And mechanics. The obvious better part, and more important part, is introducing the character of G'raha, who is the keeper of the Crystal Tower in the main part of Shadowbringers. The point is, G'raha is my best friend and the only other character confirmed to have, at the very least, a gigantic crush on the Warrior of Light. Because he and Alize share this trait no matter the gender of the Warrior of Light, it's basically confirmed that these two are pansexual, and I really like that, because when are we ever going to find that kind of thing in a Square Enix game? I can't make it any sort of way into this video without mentioning the fact that Emmett Selk is straight up the best antagonist we've had so far. He literally just comes in and tells you that, even being an Ascian, the main villain so far, he just wants to watch you guys and figure out why your goals are so opposed with theirs, if the end goal on the surface seems so similar. It's even better then that everything he tells you from front to back has always been the truth, and that not once from the moment he started tailing you was he ever interested in fooling you, simply giving the information he felt was needed to illustrate his own views and directly hit a party with this massive gray area, despite the fact that he might as well be the progenitor of the Roman Empire. Oh, and his vocal performance is miles better and 3,000,000% more cartoonish than Xenos ever was or could hope to be. which is why it pains me that periodically we have to go see what's going on with Estinian and Gaius. I care more about Gaius and his kids from the Ruby weapon storyline than I do with anything Estinian has going on. Up until Endwalker, when he's the principal member of the party. I'm sorry, guys. I don't think Estinian is that good. I don't understand the appeal yet. He's not even that hot. Besides the mechanical changes, number crunches, stuff like that came with Endwalker dropping, I have to say that the lineup of dungeons and bosses throughout the entirety of Shadowbringers has been turned up to 11. See, the first thing that anyone notices is something they should have been doing from the start, which is these little title cards which just help set the stage more than anything else. No need to wait for you to target them to learn a name, that's boring. Make it more like the older Final Fantasies where BOOM! You show up to battle and what the hell is that? And while that's a great stage setting tool in its own right, nothing compares to how it gets subverted in the main expansion when, in the final battle with Emmett Selk, reverted to Hades, there is no extra title. Nothing is holding you back anymore. It's only time for you guys to duke it out. No names, no bars, nothing is off the table, and it's just you and him. Doesn't help that Graha literally just says open the duty finder, and it's the single coolest thing that I am so glad they kept referencing in Endwalker. Oh my god, I can't wait to talk about Endwalker. The dungeons themselves are essentially one long hallway that incentivizes the standard tank maneuver of grabbing every enemy in existence, popping your most powerful mitigation, and have everyone spam their AoE attacks until everything is dead. But I do kind of wish that we had weird mechanics again, like the Sunken Temple of Karn, or that one Heavensward dungeon with the flying across platforms and shit. If anything, I just wish we had more set pieces than anything. Which is why there's only 2 real dungeons during Shadowbringers that really put a smile on my face. Those being Dawn Meg and the Hero's Gauntlet. Dawn Meg is just a fever dream with how different things get area to area, on top of having one of my favorite mid-bosses. The Hero's Gauntlet rewards you for having finished more than one of the role quests that were introduced by having characters from those quests, along with many others appear throughout the dungeon itself and assist you. Actually, just the fact that the Hero's Gauntlet is nothing more than a cop chase victory lap is the best goddamn thing on the planet. This is then followed up by my second favorite required trial, that being the Seed of Sacrifice. Now, it's not a secret to anyone that Final Fantasy XIV really likes referencing older games, and while some may see that as a detriment, I don't agree. I see it as a bonus for people who are familiar with the series proper, even through supplemental media such as Dissidia, because this design for the Warrior of Light is only found in media that isn't the first Final Fantasy game. I think that's neat. Not to mention that this is the first trial that I ever found myself using a tank level 3 limit break. Do you know how often a tank gets to level 3 limit break? Because boy howdy, let me tell ya, it's not often. Now, the Sonic landscape is something I usually never bring up because in Final Fantasy XIV, you're more than likely not always listening to it. Ask anyone there, a lot of the time, not really engaging with the excellent music written by Masayoshi Soken. Ask anyone, and there, a lot of the time, not really engaging with the music as much. I'm guilty of this as well, but to an extent, I still try to give tracks a listen when I can. Crystarium is obviously a favorite of mine, if only because I heard it the most. Raktika Greatwood is also something that I always heard a lot of before I even started playing the game, and it's great to me because, listen, I love the idea of this hooded forest getting a flute-based melody in its theme, and then suddenly, it hits you with the chorus! Like, if I met Urianger here instead of Y'shtola, this would probably still be my favorite area music in Shadowbringers. I can't go on about the music and not bring up the trial music, and even still, I can't go through a Final Fantasy XIV video and not bring up the special human being that got me into the game in the first place. The very first piece of music they ever sent me was the music for The Dancing Plague, and I could not begin to tell you how much I wanted to fight Titania whenever I got to that point in Shadowbringers. I remember telling them the second I got there and how much I liked it, because it was at that point that I finally felt a modicum of caught up with people on the current story. or at least the part of the story that was fresh in people's minds still. Not to mention the main theme for Shadowbringers, which plays at the end during the main fight against Hades, looped properly, and it's actually the song they used during the trailer. Because it's good fight music, and the devs know how to properly tie everything together with how you experience sound, finally. Unlike in Stormblood, which just ends with the Alamegan anthem and has nothing to do with the main leitmotif of Stormblood, which is that horrible chorus-singing Storm of Blood or something. The boss fight music. Stormblood wounded me in ways I can't fathom, and Shadowbringers brought me back from the goddamn brink. I love this game so much. And no, I didn't drink any Kool-Aid, I didn't just get absorbed in any shallow characters, I was immersed by the world put in front of me because that's what the devs wanted. No amount of modified Old English speech or catwomen or motorboat massages has changed how much I've enjoyed seeing my Warrior of Light experience this world, and how much I've enjoyed being there with him. Shadowbringers Final Fantasy XIV gets a Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver out of Black and White. One of the damn near perfect experiences that barely needs any tweaks to become perfect. One that wouldn't feel nearly as satisfying had I not played through the other 3 expansions before this. I'm not going to validate everyone who tried hyping me up about this game by saying that Shadowbringers made everything worth it. But I am going to say that I'm satisfied seeing many things come together. I had a really good time. My name is Sonata. Join me in Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah!